They say the Texas frontier breaks every man eventually. Some it breaks with drought, some it breaks with disease. But for one young cowboy named Thomas Reed, the breaking came not from the land, but from the silence of an empty bed and the endless crying of a motherless child. Stay with this story until the very end. What happens to this grieving father will restore your faith in humanity, and do not forget to like and subscribe for more unforgettable Wild West tales. Let us begin. The year was 1886. The plains of Texas stretched wide and merciless beneath a sky that offered little comfort. Thomas Reed had faced stampedes that nearly killed him. He had survived winters so cold that cattle froze standing up. He had fought off bandits and buried friends in shallow graves marked only by wooden crosses. But none of that had prepared him for the quiet devastation inside his own home. 6 months ago, his wife Clara had died giving birth to their son. She had held the baby for only 3 minutes before her eyes closed forever. Thomas remembered those 3 minutes like a wound that would not heal. The way she had smiled at the tiny face, the way she had whispered the name they had chosen together, the way her hand had gone limp in his. Now Thomas sat alone on his porch as the sun beat down without mercy. In his arms, his infant son wailed with a hunger that milk could not satisfy. The child wanted his mother, and Thomas could not give him that. The ranch had once been a place of laughter. Clara had planted flowers by the front gate. She had sewn curtains for every window. She had sung while she cooked, and her voice had made the isolation feel less like a prison. Now the flowers were dead. The curtains hung crooked and dusty, and the only sound was the crying of a baby who did not understand why warmth had vanished from his world. Thomas looked down at his son. The boy had Clara's eyes, that same shade of blue that reminded Thomas of the sky on their wedding day. Every time he looked at his child, he saw his wife looking back at him. It was both a blessing and a curse. For 6 long months, Thomas had searched for help. He had ridden into the nearest town, a full day's journey each way. He had posted notices at trading posts and general stores. He had spoken to every family he could find, offering good wages for anyone willing to care for an infant on a remote frontier ranch. The responses had been the same every time. Too far from town, they said. Too dangerous, they said. Too lonely, they said. A few women had come to Tripa. Mrs. Patterson lasted 4 days before the isolation drove her back to her sister's home. Young Sally Morgan stayed 2 weeks but could not bear the sound of a baby crying through the night for a mother who would never come. Old Widow Jenkins made it 3 weeks before her health failed, and her own children came to take her back east. Each departure felt like another funeral. Each time a wagon carried someone away from his gate, Thomas felt more certain that he was failing his son. The frontier demanded strength. Thomas had strength in abundance. He could rope a steer in seconds. He could ride for 12 hours without rest. He could build a fence or dig a well or track a lost animal across 20 miles of scrubland. But he could not make a baby stop crying for its mother. Nights were the hardest. When the wind rattled the windows and coyotes howled in the distance, Thomas would sit by the dying fire with his son in his arms. He would rock the child for hours, whispering promises he was not sure he could keep. "I will protect you," he would say. "I will give you everything I have. I will never leave you." But the baby did not want promises. The baby wanted soft arms and gentle songs and the heartbeat that had surrounded him for 9 months before he entered this harsh world. Thomas began to wonder if he should leave Texas entirely. Maybe the land he loved was costing his child a future. Maybe somewhere back east, in a town with doctors and schools and women who might help, his son could have a better life. But leaving meant abandoning everything Thomas had built. It meant walking away from the ranch where he had planned to grow old with Clara. It meant admitting that the frontier had finally defeated him. He was not ready to admit that. Not yet. So he kept searching. He kept hoping. He kept rocking his son through the endless nights and promising that somehow, someday, things would get better. But hope was growing thin, stretched like a frayed rope holding too much weight. Thomas did not know it yet, but help was already on its way. Not from the town, not from the east, not from anywhere he had thought to look. Help was coming from the last direction anyone would have expected. And when it arrived, it would change everything. The cowboy who had survived every hardship the frontier could throw at him was about to discover that sometimes salvation appears in the form you least expect. Sometimes the answer to your prayers does not match the picture in your mind. And sometimes a quiet stranger standing at your gate holds the power to heal wounds you thought would never close. But Thomas did not know any of that yet. All he knew was that his son was crying, the sun was setting, and another long night stretched ahead of him like a road with no end. He held his child closer and whispered one more promise into the fading light. "I will find a way," he said. "I swear to you, I will find a way." The wind carried his words across the empty plains. And somewhere out there, though he did not know it, someone was already walking toward him. 3 days passed after Thomas made his promise. 3 days of the same routine. Wake before dawn, feed the baby, clean the baby. Try to work the ranch with one arm while holding a fussing infant in the other. Fail at most tasks. Watch the sun set. Rock the baby through another sleepless night. On the fourth day, everything changed. The afternoon heat hung heavy in the air, thick as a wool blanket. Thomas sat on the porch with his son, trying to coax the child to take a bottle. The baby had been crying for hours, and Thomas could feel exhaustion pressing down on him like a physical weight. He almost missed the figure approaching the ranch gate. Travelers were rare in these parts. When strangers did appear, they usually brought trouble. Bandits, drifters, men looking for work or food or something to steal. Thomas had learned to keep his rifle within reach at all times. But this figure moved differently. Slowly, steadily, without the swagger of a man looking for trouble or the hurried pace of someone running from it. Thomas squinted against the glare of the sun. The figure was a woman. That alone was unusual. Women did not travel alone on the Texas frontier. It was too dangerous, too unpredictable, too full of men who had forgotten how to be civilized. As she drew closer, Thomas saw that she was Apache. His hand moved instinctively toward his rifle. The frontier had taught him caution, especially when it came to the native peoples whose land this had once been. Relations between settlers and tribes were complicated at best, violent at worst. Trust was a luxury few could afford, but something made him hesitate. The woman stopped at the gate. She did not try to open it. She did not call out or wave or make any sudden movements. She simply stood there, calm and patient, as though she had all the time in the world. And then the strangest thing happened. The baby, who had been crying for hours, suddenly went quiet. Thomas looked down at his son in shock. The child's small fingers uncurled. His breathing slowed. His face, red and scrunched from hours of wailing, relaxed into something like peace. In 6 months of sleepless nights and desperate attempts to comfort his son, Thomas had never seen anything like it. He looked back up at the woman. She had not moved. She simply stood there, watching, her dark eyes calm and unreadable. Thomas rose slowly from his chair, still holding the now quiet baby. He walked to the edge of the porch, close enough to speak without shouting, but far enough to reach his rifle if needed. "Who are you?" he asked. "What do you want?" The woman's voice was soft but clear, carrying easily across the distance between them. "I heard you were looking for someone to care for a child." Thomas felt his defenses rise. How had she heard that? Who had told her? What did she really want? "Where did you hear that?" he demanded. The woman tilted her head slightly, as if considering how much to share. "Word travels," she said simply, "even to those who listen from far away." Thomas did not know what to make of that answer. It was not a lie exactly, but it was not the whole truth either. "What is your name?" he asked. "Ka," she replied. "Just Ka. Nothing more. No family name, no tribe, no explanation." Thomas studied her face, searching for signs of deception. He had learned to read people on the frontier. Liars usually looked away or talked too much, or shifted their weight from foot to foot. This woman did none of those things. She met his gaze steadily, without challenge but without submission either. And still the baby remained quiet. That silence spoke louder than any words could have. "Why would you want to help a settler's child?" Thomas asked. His voice came out harsher than he intended. "Your people have no reason to love mine." Ka did not flinch at the question. She seemed to have expected what? "A child is a child," she said. "Hunger does not know the color of skin. Loneliness does not understand borders. I am here because I can help. That is all." Thomas wanted to argue. He wanted to list all the reasons why this was a bad idea. He wanted to protect himself from the disappointment of trusting someone who would inevitably leave. But his son was quiet. For the first time in days, the baby was not crying. "What do you want in return?" Thomas asked. Kay's answer surprised him. "A roof when the rain comes, food when I am hungry, respect for my place in your home, nothing more, no wages, no contract, no demands." Thomas had been dealing with people his whole life. Everyone wanted something. Everyone had a price. The idea of someone offering help without expecting anything in return seemed impossible. And yet, he looked down at his son again. The baby's eyes were open, but they were calm, peaceful, almost curious, as if he sensed something Thomas could not. Thomas made a decision that went against every instinct the frontier had taught him. "Come inside," he said. "We will talk." He walked to the gate and opened it. Kay stepped through without hesitation, but also without rushing. She moved like someone who understood the weight of the moment. As she passed him, Thomas caught a faint scent of sage and wood smoke. It reminded him of something he could not name, something old and grounding and real. He led her toward the house, still unsure whether he was making the best decision of his life or the worst mistake of his survival. Behind them, the gate swung closed with a soft creak, and somewhere deep in his chest, in a place Thomas had thought was dead, something flickered back to life. It felt almost like hope. The inside of the ranch house told a story Thomas had not meant to share. Dust gathered on surfaces Clara would have wiped clean every morning. Dishes sat unwashed in a basin that had once sparkled. The curtains Clara had sewn hung crooked and faded, and cobwebs stretched across corners she never would have tolerated. Thomas felt a flush of shame as Ka stepped through the door. He had been so focused on keeping his son alive that the house had fallen into neglect. But if Ka noticed the mess, she did not show it. Her eyes moved slowly across the room, taking in details without judgment. She seemed to be memorizing the space, learning its shape and rhythm the way a traveler learns a new trail. "You can set your things over there," Thomas said, gesturing toward a small room off the main living area. It was meant to be a storage space, but it had a window and enough room for a bed. Clara had talked about turning it into a nursery someday. Someday had never come. Ka nodded and moved toward the room, but she stopped at the threshold. She turned back to Thomas with a question in her eyes. "May I enter?" she asked. Thomas blinked. No one had ever asked permission to enter a room in his house before. The hired women who had come and gone had simply walked wherever they pleased, treating the space as if it were already theirs. "Of course," he said. "That room is yours now. You do not need to ask." Ka shook her head slightly. "I will always ask," she said. "This is your home. I am a guest here. Respect is given, not assumed." She stepped into the room and set down the small bundle she carried. Thomas realized it contained everything she owned: a blanket, a pouch of dried herbs, a carved wooden comb. Nothing else. In a world where people measured worth by possessions, Ka traveled with almost nothing. Yet she did not seem poor. She seemed free. Thomas watched her for a moment, then looked down at his son. The baby was still quiet, still calm. His small fingers gripped the fabric of Thomas's shirt, as if holding onto something solid in an uncertain world. "Are you hungry?" Thomas asked. "I can fix something. It will not be fancy." Ka emerged from the small room and nodded. "I can help," she offered. Thomas shook his head. "You just arrived. Rest first. I can manage." But even as he said it, he knew it was not entirely true. Managing was all he had done for 6 months. Managing was not the same as living. He moved to the stove, with the baby still in his arms, trying to prepare a simple meal while holding a child who was finally not crying. Ka watched for a moment, then stepped forward. "May I hold him?" she asked. Thomas hesitated. Handing his son to a stranger went against every protective instinct he possessed. But something in Ka's voice, something in the way his son had responded to her presence, made him want to trust. Slowly, carefully, he transferred the baby into Ka's arms. Her movements were natural and practiced. She cradled the child against her chest with a confidence that spoke of experience. The baby looked up at her face, studying her features with wide eyes that seemed too wise for an infant. Ka smiled down at him. It was a small smile, quiet and genuine, the kind of smile that reached the eyes. Thomas felt his throat tighten. For months, his son had cried at every stranger. He had screamed when Mrs. Patterson held him. He had wailed for hours after Sally Morgan tried to rock him to sleep. He had turned red and rigid in Widow Jenkins' arms. But with Ka, the baby was peaceful, content, almost happy. Thomas turned back to the stove, blinking hard against emotions he did not have time to feel. He focused on the task at hand. Beans from a can, cornbread from yesterday, coffee that was stronger than it needed to be. When the food was ready, he set 2 plates on the table. Ka took a seat, still holding the baby, and they ate in silence. It was not an uncomfortable silence. It was the silence of 2 people who understood that words were not always necessary. The silence of strangers learning to share a space without pretending to know each other. After the meal, as the sun began its slow descent toward the horizon, Ka rose and carried the baby toward the window. The light painted everything in shades of gold and amber, softening the hard edges of the frontier world outside. She began to hum. The melody was unfamiliar to Thomas. It rose and fell in patterns that did not match any song he had ever heard. The notes were low and rhythmic, like water flowing over stones or wind moving through tall grass. It was a lullaby, not in English, not in any language Thomas recognized, but the meaning was clear. Sleep, little one. You are safe. You are loved. The baby's eyes grew heavy. His small body relaxed against Ka's chest. Within minutes, he was asleep. Thomas stared in disbelief. His son never fell asleep that easily. Never. The child fought rest like a soldier fighting an enemy. Every night was a battle of hours of pacing and rocking and desperate whispered prayers. But Ka had sung one song, and the baby slept. "How did you do that?" Thomas asked. His voice came out rough, almost accusatory. Ka did not take offense. "Babies know when they are safe," she said quietly. "They feel it in the arms that hold them. They hear it in the voice that speaks to them. Your son has been afraid because he felt your fear." Tonight, he felt something different. Thomas wanted to argue. He wanted to say that he had done everything right, that his fear had nothing to do with his son's crying. But he knew she was right. For 6 months, Thomas had been terrified. Terrified of failing his son. Terrified of losing him the way he had lost Clara. Terrified of the future and the past and every sleepless moment in between. His son had felt all of it, every tremor of doubt, every wave of grief, every desperate prayer whispered into the darkness. Ka had brought something different into the room. Calm, certainty. A presence that did not fear what tomorrow might bring because she was too busy being present in today. Thomas sank into a chair by the fire. His body ached with exhaustion he had been ignoring for months. "I have not slept properly since she died," he admitted. The words came out before he could stop them. Ka looked at him with eyes that held no pity, only understanding. "Grief is heavy," she said. "It weighs more than any burden you can carry on your back. But it does not last forever. Nothing does." Thomas stared into the flames. He wanted to believe her. He wanted to believe that someday the weight would lift, that the memories would hurt less, that he could think of Clara and smile instead of breaking apart. But right now, belief felt like a luxury he could not afford. "Sleep tonight," Ka said. "I will watch over the child. If he wakes, I will care for him." Thomas shook his head automatically. "I cannot ask you to do that. You just arrived." "You did not ask," Ka replied. "I am offering. There is a difference." She settled into the rocking chair by the window, the sleeping baby still cradled in her arms. Her posture was relaxed but alert, like a deer resting in a meadow, always aware of what moved in the shadows. Thomas wanted to refuse. He wanted to prove that he could handle this alone, that he did not need help, that he was strong enough to carry every burden himself, but his body betrayed him. His eyes grew heavy, his muscles unclenched for the first time in months. "Just for a few hours," he said. "Wake me if you need anything." Ka nodded. Thomas made his way to his bedroom, the room he had shared with Clara. He had not slept there since she died. He had been sleeping in the chair by the fire, waking every few minutes to check on the baby, never fully resting, never fully healing. But tonight something was different. He lay down on the bed that still smelled faintly of his wife's perfume. He closed his eyes against the memories that threatened to overwhelm him. And for the first time in 6 months, Thomas Reed slept. He did not know it yet, but this was the beginning of everything changing. The beginning of trust, the beginning of healing, the beginning of a new chapter he had never imagined possible. Outside, the stars emerged one by one above the Texas frontier. The wind whispered through the grass. Coyotes called to each other across the dark plains. And in the small ranch house, a quiet Apache woman rocked a sleeping child and hummed songs from a world that most settlers would never understand. Peace had come to this broken place, not with fanfare or celebration, not with promises or contracts, just with presence, just with patience, just with a stranger who had chosen to stay when everyone else had left. Thomas slept through the night for the first time since his wife died. And when he woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of his son cooing contentedly, he knew something fundamental had shifted. He just did not know yet how much further it would go. The first week passed like a dream Thomas was afraid to believe in. Every morning he woke to find Ka already awake, the baby fed in content. Every evening she sang the child to sleep with those ancient melodies that seemed to carry magic in their notes. Every night Thomas slept deeper than he had in months. But trust does not build in days. The frontier had taught him that. Trust is tested in moments of pressure, proven in choices made when no one is watching. Thomas found himself testing Ka without meaning to. He would leave the room suddenly and listen from the hallway to hear how she treated his son when she thought she was alone. He heard her speaking softly to the baby, telling him stories in a mixture of English and her native tongue. He heard her laughing at his small sounds, praising his attempts to grip her finger, celebrating every tiny achievement as if it were the most important thing in the world. He started leaving money on the table, small amounts, to see if it would disappear. It never did. Ka did not touch anything that was not offered to her. He tested her patience by coming home late from work on the ranch, not telling her when to expect him. She never complained. She simply cared for the child and waited, dinner warming on the stove, no accusation in her eyes when he finally walked through the door. By the end of the second week, Thomas had run out of tests. Ka was exactly who she appeared to be. A woman who had come to help, who asked for nothing beyond the basics of survival, who treated his son with a tenderness that made Thomas's heart ache for reasons he could not name. One afternoon, while Ka bathed the baby in a small tub by the fire, Thomas sat on the porch and watched the clouds gathering on the horizon. A storm was coming. He could smell it in the air, feel it in the way the wind shifted. A storm was also building inside him. Questions he had not allowed himself to ask. Curiosity he had tried to suppress. When Ka emerged with the baby wrapped in a clean blanket, Thomas spoke before he could stop himself. "Where did you come from?" he asked. Ka settled into the rocking chair beside him. She did not seem surprised by the question. "Far from here," she said, "from the mountains to the west, a place that does not exist anymore." Thomas waited for her to continue. She was quiet for a long moment, her eyes fixed on the approaching clouds. "My village was destroyed," she said finally. "Disease first, then soldiers. I lost everyone. My parents, my sisters, my husband, and my son." Thomas felt the words like a physical blow. "You had a son," he repeated. Ka nodded. His name meant running water in our tongue. He was 3 summers old when the sickness took him. "I am sorry," Thomas said. The words felt inadequate, but he meant them. Kay turned to look at him, and for the first time he saw something vulnerable in her eyes. "Grief knows no boundaries," she said. "It touches the Apache and the settler alike. It does not care about the color of skin or the words we use to pray." When I heard about a man alone with a crying baby, searching for someone to help, I understood his pain. I had lived it myself. Thomas looked down at his son, sleeping peacefully in Ka's arms. "Is that why you came?" he asked. "Because you understood." Ka shook her head slightly. "I came because the child needed me," she said, "and because I needed him. We do not always choose our paths. Sometimes they choose us." The storm broke that night with fury. Lightning split the sky. Thunder shook the walls. Rain hammered the roof like thousands of tiny fists demanding entry. Thomas had weathered many storms alone, but this time he was not alone. Ko stayed calm throughout the tempest, humming to the baby when thunder made him startle, keeping the fire burning strong, moving through the house with a steadiness that anchored the chaos outside. At one point, when the lightning was so bright it turned night into day, Thomas caught Ka standing by the window, watching the storm with an expression he could not read. Do you believe in signs? She asked without turning around. Thomas considered the question. I used to, he said, before Clara died. Now I am not sure what I believe. Ka nodded as if this answer made perfect sense. My people believed that storms were messages from the spirits, she said. They believed that great changes always come with thunder. I do not know if that is true, but I know that after the storm passes, the land is always cleaner, fresher, ready to grow things that could not grow before. The storm raged until nearly dawn. When it finally passed, the sun rose over a world washed clean. Puddles sparkled in the yard, and the air smelled of rain and new beginnings. Thomas stepped onto the porch and breathed deeply. Behind him, Ka emerged with the baby, who was wide awake and cooing at the bright new world. I think, Thomas said slowly, that I am ready to stop testing you. Ka smiled, the first full smile he had seen from her. I know, she said. I have been waiting. Thomas turned to look at her, surprised. You knew what I was doing? Of course, Ka replied. Trust must be earned. I did not expect you to give it freely. A wise man protects his family. You are a wise man, Thomas Reed. Nobody had called him wise in a very long time. Clara used to tease him about his stubbornness, his certainty, his refusal to admit when he was wrong. He had never thought of those qualities as wisdom. But maybe they were. Maybe wisdom was not about having all the answers. Maybe it was about caring enough to find them. From that day forward, something changed between Thomas and Ka. The invisible wall of caution that had stood between them began to crumble. They ate meals together and actually talked. They shared stories about their pasts, their losses, their hopes. Thomas learned that Ka had been a healer in her village, trained by her grandmother in the old ways. She knew which plants could cure fever and which could ease pain. She knew how to read the weather and the flight of birds and the behavior of insects. She knew things that no book could teach. Wisdom passed down through generations of people who had lived close to the land. Ka learned that Thomas had come to Texas to escape a life that felt too small. He had grown up in Ohio, the son of a farmer who wanted him to be a farmer too. But Thomas had dreamed of open spaces and wild horses and sunsets that stretched across the entire sky. He had come west to find himself. He had found Clara instead. She was the daughter of a rancher 3 counties over, Thomas told Ka one evening as they sat on the porch watching the stars. I saw her at a church social and knew immediately that she was the one. I spent 6 months working up the courage to speak to her. When I finally did, she laughed and said she had been waiting for me to stop being a coward. Ka smiled. She sounds like a strong woman. She was, Thomas said. She was the strongest person I ever knew. Until the end. His voice caught on the last words. Ka did not try to fill the silence. She simply sat with him in it, honoring the grief rather than rushing past it. That is the true test of trust, Thomas would realize later. Not whether someone stays during the easy times, but whether they stay during the hard ones. Ka stayed. And slowly, day by day, the broken ranch began to feel like a home again. Thomas knew the judgment would come eventually. He had simply hoped it would take longer. 6 weeks after Ka arrived, Thomas rode into town for supplies. The baby stayed home with Ka, the first time Thomas had left them alone together for more than a few hours. It felt strange and right at the same time, like releasing a breath he had not realized he was holding. The general store was busy when he arrived. Several ranchers stood near the counter, discussing cattle prices and weather patterns. Conversation stopped when Thomas walked in. He noticed the silence but tried to ignore it. He moved through the aisles, gathering flour, sugar, coffee, and fabric for clothes the baby would need as he grew. At the counter, old Mr. Henderson tallied up the purchases with his usual slow precision. Heard you got yourself some help out at the ranch, Henderson said. His tone was casual, but his eyes were sharp. Thomas nodded. I did. Also heard about who that help is, Henderson continued. An Apache woman. That true, it was not really a question. Her name is Ka, Thomas said evenly. She cares for my son. The store had gone completely quiet. Thomas could feel eyes on his back, could hear the whispers starting behind him. That seems like a strange choice, Henderson said. There are plenty of good Christian women who would be happy to help a widower with a child. Plenty of good Christian women already tried, Thomas replied. None of them stayed. Henderson exchanged a look with one of the ranchers nearby. Maybe none of them stayed because they knew it was not right, the rancher said. His name was Bill Crawford, and he owned the largest spread in the county. What kind of influence is a savage going to have on that boy? Thomas felt his hands clench at his sides. She is not a savage, he said. His voice was quiet but hard. She is a woman who lost her own family and chose to help mine. She treats my son with more kindness than anyone else who has come to that ranch. Crawford snorted. Kindness. Is that what they call it? I call it witchcraft. Everyone knows those people have strange ways. Thomas took a step toward Crawford, his whole body tense with anger he was struggling to control. You do not know anything about her, Thomas said. You have never met her. You have never seen her with my son. You are judging her based on nothing but fear and ignorance. I am judging her based on common sense, Crawford shot back. You bring one of them into your home. Next thing you know, your cattle are poisoned and your house is burned down. Thomas stared at him. My wife died 6 months ago, he said slowly. My son cried every night for a mother who would never come. I begged for help. I pleaded. Not one person in this town lifted a finger to help me. That is not entirely true, Henderson started. It is exactly true. Thomas cut him off. Mrs. Patterson stayed 4 days. Sally Morgan stayed 2 weeks. Widow Jenkins stayed 3 weeks. Everyone else made excuses and turned away. Ka came when no one else would. She stays when everyone else left, and you stand here judging her for the crime of being born different. The store was silent. Thomas realized his voice had risen to nearly a shout. He took a breath and forced himself to calm down. I did not come here for a fight, he said. I came here for supplies. If you will not sell to me, I will take my business elsewhere. Henderson shook his head quickly. I will sell to you, he said. I have no quarrel with you, Thomas. But people talk. You know how it is. Thomas paid for his supplies and loaded them into his wagon. As he climbed onto the seat, Crawford called out from the store's porch. You are making a mistake, Reed. Mark my words. That woman will bring nothing but trouble. Thomas did not respond. He drove away without looking back. But the words followed him all the way home. When he arrived at the ranch, Ka was sitting under the cottonwood tree with the baby in her lap. She had strung wooden beads on a leather cord and was showing the child how they caught the light. Thomas watched them for a moment before approaching. Ka looked up as he drew near. She read his face instantly. The town knows, she said. It was not a question. Thomas nodded. Word travels. Ka's expression remained calm, but Thomas saw something flicker behind her eyes. Resignation, perhaps, or the weariness of someone who had faced rejection too many times to count. I can leave, she said quietly, if my presence brings you trouble. Thomas felt something twist in his chest. No, he said firmly, you are not going anywhere. Ka studied his face. You are certain. Thomas sat down on the grass beside her. The baby gurgled happily, reaching for the wooden beads. I lost my wife, Thomas said. I spent 6 months watching my son suffer. I know what it feels like to have no one willing to help. I am not going to do that to someone else. Ka was quiet for a moment. The town will not forget, she said. They will talk. They will judge. Some may refuse to do business with you. Let them, Thomas said. I have enough land to grow what I need. I have enough cattle to sustain us. I do not need the town's approval to raise my son. Ka looked at him with something that might have been surprise or gratitude or both. You are not like other settlers I have known, she said. Thomas shrugged. My wife used to say I was too stubborn for my own good. She was usually right about everything else. She might have been right about that too. Ka smiled softly. Stubbornness can be a gift, she said, when it is used to protect what matters. They sat together as the sun moved lower in the sky. The baby fell asleep in Ka's arms, peaceful and content. Thomas watched them and felt something settle in his chest, a certainty he had not felt in months. The town could talk all it wanted, let them whisper and judge and spread their fears. Thomas had found something rare on the frontier, someone he could trust, someone who treated his son with genuine love, someone who asked for nothing and gave everything. He was not going to let other people's fear take that away. As the stars began to appear overhead, Thomas made a silent vow. He would protect this woman who had come to his aid. He would stand beside her against whatever judgment the world chose to throw. He would give her the same loyalty she had given his son. It was the least he could do for someone who had saved them both. 2 weeks after the confrontation at the store, Thomas woke to find a message nailed to his fence post. The paper was rough and the handwriting crude, but the meaning was clear. Get rid of the savage or face the consequences. Thomas tore the note down and crumpled it in his fist. Anger burned through him, hot and immediate. Ka emerged from the house with the baby, heading toward the well for the morning's water. She saw the expression on his face and stopped. "What is wrong?" she asked. Thomas considered hiding the truth, protecting her from the ugliness that had followed her here. But Ka deserved honesty. She had given him nothing but honesty since the day she arrived. He smoothed out the crumpled paper and showed her. Ka read the words without any visible reaction. When she looked up, her face was calm. "This is not the first time I have received such a message," she said. "It will likely not be the last." "That does not make it acceptable," Thomas replied. Ka handed the note back to him. "Hatred is a sickness," she said. "It spreads from person to person like fever. The only cure is time and understanding. Some people never find the cure." Thomas wanted to argue. He wanted to ride into town and demand to know who had written the note. He wanted to stand in the middle of the street and tell everyone exactly what he thought of their cowardice. But Ka's calm was catching. He felt his anger begin to cool, replaced by something more useful. "Determination. I'm going to protect you," he said. "Whatever comes." Ka smiled slightly. "I can protect myself," she said. "I have done so for many years, but I appreciate the offer." Over the following days, Thomas kept a closer watch on the ranch. He carried his rifle with him everywhere. He checked the fences morning and night. He listened for sounds that did not belong to the normal rhythms of the land. The threat came on a night when the moon was dark. Thomas woke to the sound of hoofbeats, many of them, approaching fast. He grabbed his rifle and ran to the window. 6 riders were approaching the ranch, their faces covered with bandanas. They carried torches that flickered against the blackness. Thomas's heart pounded. He had faced danger before, but never with a child and a woman to protect. Ka appeared beside him, the baby clutched to her chest. "How many?" she asked. Her voice was steady, without fear. 6, Thomas said. "Maybe more coming." Ka nodded. She turned and moved to the back of the house, where a small door led to the root cellar. "I will take the child below," she said. "You keep them away from the house." Thomas wanted to argue. He wanted to tell her to stay close, where he could protect her. But Ka's confidence steadied him. She knew what she was doing. "Be careful," he said. Ka paused at the cellar door. "You too," she replied. Then she was gone, disappearing into the darkness below with his son. Thomas turned back to the window. The riders had reached the gate. One of them dismounted and shouted toward the house. "Reed, we know you are in there. Send out the savage and nobody gets hurt." Thomas recognized the voice. Bill Crawford. He opened the front door and stepped onto the porch, rifle raised. "Get off my land," he called back. Crawford laughed. "This is not your land anymore," he said. "Not while you keep that woman here. We are giving you one chance. Send her out and we will leave you in peace." Thomas felt rage building in his chest, but he kept his voice level. "She has done nothing wrong," he said. "She cares for a motherless child. If that is a crime, then arrest me too." "We do not need to arrest anyone," Crawford replied. "We just need to send a message. The frontier is not a place for mixing. You keep to your kind, we keep to ours. Simple as that." Thomas aimed his rifle at Crawford's chest. "The only simple thing here is you," he said. "Now get off my property before I put a bullet between your eyes." For a long moment, nobody moved. Then one of the other riders spoke. "Bill," he said nervously, "we did not come here to kill anyone." Crawford hesitated. Thomas could see the conflict in his body language, the desire to push forward warring with the instinct to back down. "This is not over," Crawford finally said. "You cannot watch that woman every minute of every day. Sooner or later, she will be alone." Thomas felt cold fear grip his heart, but he did not let it show. "Threaten her again, and I will not wait for the law," he said. "I will handle this myself." Crawford stared at him for a long moment. Then he mounted his horse and signaled to the others. The riders turned and disappeared into the night. Thomas stood on the porch until he could no longer hear the hoofbeats. Then he went to the cellar and called down to Ka. "It is safe," he said. "They are gone. Ka emerged with the baby, who had somehow slept through the entire ordeal. They will come back, Ka said. Men like that do not stop until they get what they want. Thomas nodded. Then we need to be ready, he said. That night, neither of them slept. They sat together by the fire, watching the door, waiting for dawn. When the sun finally rose, Thomas made a decision. I am going to the sheriff, he said. I will tell him what happened. Even if he does not believe me, there will be a record. If anything happens to you, there will be someone to blame. Ka looked at him with an expression he could not quite read. You would go that far, she asked, for me. Thomas met her eyes steadily. Yes, he said, I would. Ka was silent for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was softer than he had ever heard it. I have not had many people willing to stand for me, she said. It is a strange feeling. Almost uncomfortable. Thomas smiled slightly. Get used to it, he said. He rode to town that morning and filed a report with Sheriff Martin, a tired man who had seen too much frontier violence to be surprised by anything anymore. I will talk to Crawford, the sheriff said, but you know how these things go. Without witnesses, it is your word against his. I know, Thomas said. I just want it on record. The sheriff nodded. You are walking a hard road, Reed, he said. I hope you know what you are doing. Thomas thought of Ka, of her calm strength, of the way she held his son with such tenderness. I know exactly what I am doing, he said, and for once, he truly believed it. The threat from Crawford faded into an uneasy quiet. Weeks passed without incident. Thomas began to hope that the danger had passed, that the night riders had been scared off by his defiance. Then the baby got sick. It started with a fever, just a small one at first, barely noticeable. But by the second day, Thomas's son was burning hot, his cries weak and thready, his small body struggling against something invisible and terrifying. Thomas paced the floor, helpless. He had seen grown men die from frontier diseases. He had watched cowboys succumb to infections that started as small as a scratch. The idea of his son, so tiny and vulnerable, fighting for his life was almost more than he could bear. Ka remained calm. She sent Thomas to gather specific plants from the creek bed, herbs with names he had never heard spoken in English. She boiled water and prepared poultices. She sat beside the baby's cradle for hours, singing songs that seemed to reach beyond the physical world. What are you doing? Thomas asked on the third night. The fever had not broken. His son's breathing was shallow and rapid. Ka looked up at him, exhaustion showing on her face for the first time since he had met her. I am doing everything I know, she said. The old medicines, the old huangs. Sometimes they work. Sometimes the spirits decide differently. Thomas felt panic rising in his chest. You cannot talk like that, he said. You cannot give up. Ka shook her head. I am not giving up, she said. I am telling you the truth. Life and death are not always in our hands. We do what we can. The rest is not ours to control. Thomas wanted to argue. He wanted to rage against her calm acceptance. But looking at her face, at the dark circles under her eyes, at the way her hands trembled slightly as she cooled the baby's forehead with a damp cloth, he realized she was fighting just as hard as he was. She was simply fighting in a different way. On the fourth night, the fever broke. Thomas woke from an exhausted doze to find Ka holding the baby, tears streaming silently down her face. For one terrible moment, he thought the worst had happened. Then he heard his son cry. Not the weak, thready cry of a sick child. A strong, healthy, demanding cry. The cry of a baby who was hungry and wanted everyone to know it. Thomas crossed the room in 3 steps and looked down at his son. The baby's skin was cool to the touch. His eyes were bright and alert. He looked up at his father and waved tiny fists in the air. He is going to live, Ka said. Her voice was hoarse, cracked from singing for 4 straight days. The fever is gone. Thomas felt his legs give way. He sank to his knees beside the cradle, overwhelmed by relief so intense it felt like drowning. Thank you, he whispered. He did not know if he was speaking to Ka or to Kate or to the spirit she had called upon. Thank you, Ka placed her hand on his shoulder. He is strong, she said, like his father. He will survive many things in this life. Thomas looked up at her. Tears he had been holding back for months finally fell. I could not have done this without you, he said. If you had not been here, If you had not known what to do, he would have died. Ka shook her head. I did only what I could, she said. You did the rest. Your love kept him fighting. Thomas wanted to argue, but he was too exhausted for words. He simply reached up and took Ka's hand in his. They stayed like that as the sun rose, two people who had walked through fire together and come out the other side. The days that followed felt like a new beginning. The baby recovered quickly, growing stronger with each passing hour. Thomas watched his son learn to smile again, learn to laugh again, and felt his own heart beginning to heal in ways he had not thought possible. He found himself watching Ka differently, not with suspicion or caution or even gratitude, with something deeper, something that scared him almost as much as the fever had scared him. He tried to push the feelings away. It was too soon. Clara had been gone less than a year. It felt like a betrayal to even think about another woman. But Ka was not just another woman. She had become part of his life in a way he could not explain. She knew his routines, his moods, his fears. She knew how he took his coffee and which hymns made him think of his wife. She knew when to speak and when to stay silent. She knew him, and he was beginning to know her. One evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Thomas finally spoke the words that had been building in his chest. I do not know what this is, he said. What I am feeling, it is confusing. Ka did not look at him. I know, she said. I feel it too. Thomas turned to her in surprise. You do? Ka nodded slowly. I was married once, she said. I love my husband deeply. When he died, I thought I would never feel anything again. But the heart does not obey our commands. It opens when it is ready. Thomas was quiet for a long moment. Clara has only been gone 8 months, he said. People will talk. Ka smiled softly. People already talk, she said. Let them. Thomas felt something shift inside him. Not the sharp crack of a branch breaking, but the slow opening of a door that had been closed too long. He reached out and took Ka's hand. They did not need to say anything more. They simply sat together as the stars came out. Two wounded people finding their way towards something neither had expected to find again. Hope. The months that followed were the happiest Thomas had known since Clara's death. He and Ka built a rhythm together, a partnership that went beyond caretaker and employer. They shared meals and stories in the small, daily tasks that make up a life. They laughed together at the baby's first attempts to crawl. They worried together when a drought threatened the cattle. They planned together for a future that was beginning to feel possible. Thomas never forgot Clara. He still visited her grave every Sunday, laying wildflowers on the small headstone and telling her about the week that had passed. But the visits became less painful over time. He began to feel that Clara would have approved of Ka, would have understood why Thomas was allowing himself to love again. One night, as they sat by the fire after the baby had fallen asleep, Thomas asked Ka the question he had been avoiding for months. What happens now, he said. Where do we go from here? Ka looked at him steadily. That depends on what you want, she said. Thomas took a deep breath. I want you to stay, he said. Not as someone who cares for my son, as someone who is part of this family, if you would have me. Ka was silent for a long moment. Thomas felt his heart pounding in his chest, terrified that he had said too much, moved too fast, ruined everything. Then Ka smiled. I would have you, she said. I have wanted to have you for longer than I should admit. Thomas felt joy surge through him, so intense it was almost painful. Then stay, he said. Stay forever. Ka reached out and touched his face. Forever is a long time, she said. But I will stay for as long as you want me. Thomas leaned forward and kissed her. It was a gentle kiss, hesitant and hopeful, the kiss of two people who had been afraid to take this step and were now finding the courage to take it anyway. When they pulled apart, Ka was crying. I did not think I would ever have this again, she whispered. A family, a home, someone to love. Thomas pulled her close. You have it now, he said, for as long as I live. The next morning, Thomas rode into town with a purpose. He went straight to the church and asked to speak with Reverend Matthews. I want to get married, Thomas said. The Reverend looked surprised. To whom? He asked. To Ka, Thomas said. The woman who lives on my ranch. Reverend Matthews was quiet for a long moment. Thomas could see the conflict in his face. the struggle between duty and prejudice. You know that will cause problems, the Reverend said finally. Not everyone in this town will accept such a union. I am not asking everyone in this town, Thomas replied. I am asking you. The Reverend sighed. I cannot marry you in the church, he said. The congregation would not allow it, but I can perform a ceremony in your home, a legal marriage blessed by God, if that is acceptable to you. Thomas nodded. It is, he said. The wedding was small, just Thomas, Ka, the baby, and Reverend Matthews. They stood in the living room of the ranch house, surrounded by the things Clara had chosen and Ka had kept clean and bright. When the Reverend asked if Thomas took Ka as his wife, Thomas said yes without hesitation. When the Reverend asked if Ka took Thomas as her husband, she said yes with tears in her eyes. They exchanged rings that Thomas had made from silver, coins, simple bands that represented everything they could not say in words. And then it was done. They were married. That night, as they lay together for the first time as husband and wife, Thomas felt something he had thought was lost forever settle back into place. He was not alone anymore. He had a family again. He had someone to share the burdens and the pain, the hardships and the triumphs. He had found love in the last place he expected to find it, and he was never going to let it go. The news of the marriage spread through the town like wildfire. Some people were outraged. Bill Crawford tried to rally support for another night ride, but this time no one would join him. The sheriff had made it clear that any further harassment would be met with jail time. Other people were curious. A few brave souls rode out to the ranch to meet the Apache woman who had captured Thomas Reed's heart. Most of them left with grudging respect, impressed by Ka's dignity, her kindness, and the obvious love she had for Thomas and his son. Over time, the hostility faded, not completely, but enough. There would always be people who refused to accept them, but there were also people who did, people who saw beyond the differences to the love underneath. And that was enough. On their first anniversary, Thomas and Ka sat on the porch as the sun set over the Texas frontier. The baby, who was walking now and getting into everything, played in the yard with a wooden horse Thomas had carved for him. I never thought I would be this happy again, Thomas said. Kay leaned her head against his shoulder. Neither did I, she said. But here we are. Here we are, Thomas repeated. The future stretched before them, uncertain but full of promise. There would be challenges ahead. There always were on the frontier. But they would face them together as partners, as parents, as husband and wife. And that made all the difference. 3 years passed on the Reed Ranch. Thomas's son grew tall and strong, with his mother's blue eyes and his father's stubbornness. He learned to ride almost before he could walk, following Thomas around the ranch on a small pony Ka had trained for him. He called Ka Mama without hesitation. It was the only mother he had ever known, the only one he remembered. Thomas told him stories about Clara sometimes, showed him the photograph from their wedding day, made sure he knew the woman who had given him life. But Ka was his mother in every way that mattered. And then, another miracle. Kay told Thomas she was pregnant on a spring morning when the wildflowers were just beginning to bloom. Thomas had stared at her for a long moment, unable to speak, tears streaming down his face. A second child, a new life, a family that was growing instead of shrinking. The pregnancy was difficult. Ka was not young, and the frontier was not kind to expecting mothers. Thomas hovered and worried and drove her half crazy with his constant attention. But Ka was strong. She had survived worse than pregnancy. She walked through the discomfort with the same calm determination she brought to everything else. On a cold December night, with snow falling softly outside, Ka gave birth to a daughter. Thomas held the tiny baby girl in his arms and wept for the second time since Clara's death. But these were different tears. These were tears of joy, of gratitude, of overwhelming love. They named her Clara. It seemed right. The little girl had Ka's dark hair and Thomas's nose, and a smile that could light up the darkest room. She was perfect in every way. Thomas's son accepted his new sister with the enthusiastic devotion of a 4-year-old. He appointed himself her protector, her entertainer, and her constant companion. He brought her flowers from the field and rocks from the creek, and once, memorably, a small green snake that made Ka scream for the first and only time Thomas could remember. The ranch prospered. Thomas expanded the herd and built a bigger barn. He hired help, men who judged him by the quality of his cattle rather than the race of his wife. He even made peace with some of his former enemies in town, discovering that time and persistence could soften even the hardest hearts. Ka became known in the area as a healer. People who had once scorned her came quietly to the ranch, seeking remedies for their ailments, wisdom for their troubles. She helped them all, never holding their former cruelty against them. Some say that is how you defeat hate, she told Thomas once. Not by fighting it, but by refusing to become it. Thomas thought about that often. He had wanted revenge on the men who had threatened his family. He had dreamed of making them pay for their cruelty. But Ka's way was better. Her kindness shamed them more effectively than any punishment could have. By the time little Clara was 2 years old, even Bill Crawford had stopped his hostility. He never apologized, not in words, but he stopped spreading rumors. He stopped organizing resistance. He even nodded at Thomas in church once, a grudging acknowledgement that the battle was over. Thomas nodded back. Some victories come with fanfare. Others come with silence. Both are worth celebrating. On a warm summer evening, 20 years after Ka first appeared at his gate, Thomas sat on the same porch where he had first seen her. His hair was gray now, his body slower than it used to be, but his eyes were bright and his heart was full. Ka sat beside him, her own hair streaked with silver, her face lined with the marks of a life well lived. She was still the most beautiful woman Thomas had ever known. Their children had grown and gone. Thomas's son had married a girl from the next county and started his own ranch just 10 miles away. He visited every Sunday with his wife and their 2 children, filling the house with noise and laughter and life. Little Clara, who was not so little anymore, had become a teacher. She lived in town and taught children of all backgrounds, carrying her mother's message of acceptance into the next generation. The ranch was quiet now, but it was a peaceful quiet, the quiet of completion rather than emptiness, the quiet of a story well told. Ka reached over and took Thomas's hand. "Do you remember when we first met?" she asked. Thomas smiled. "I remember thinking you were either the answer to my prayers or my biggest mistake," he said. "I was too tired to tell which." Ka laughed, a sound that still made Thomas's heart lift after all these years. "I remember thinking you were the saddest man I had ever seen," she said, "and the strongest. I knew then that you were someone worth staying for." Thomas squeezed her hand. "I have never thanked you properly," he said, "for everything, for saving my son, for saving me, for building this life with me." Ka shook her head. "You do not need to thank me," she said. "You gave me just as much. A home, a family, a second chance at happiness. We saved each other." Thomas nodded. It was true, they had walked through darkness together and emerged into light. They had faced hatred and fear and loss and come out stronger. They had built something beautiful from the broken pieces of their pasts. The sun was setting now, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. The same colors it had been on that long ago evening when Ka first sang his son to sleep. The same colors it would be tomorrow and the day after and every day until the end of time. Some things never changed, and some changes were worth everything. Thomas looked at his wife, at the woman who had transformed his life. "I love you," he said. "I have always loved you." Ka smiled, the same soft smile she had given him on their wedding day. "I know," she said. "I love you too. Forever." They sat together as the stars came out, two people who had found each other against all odds. Two people who had proven that love was stronger than hate, that kindness was more powerful than cruelty, that hope could grow in even the most barren ground. The Texas frontier was still harsh, still unpredictable, still dangerous. But inside that small ranch house, peace had taken root, and it would last for generations to come.